From the Mumbai studios of Republic TV, it's time for Arnab Goswami on The Debate.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Russia's upper house has just given Russian President Vladimir Putin full and total 100% permission to use military force outside the country. This is not brinkmanship, it is more. Will the rest respond with military force as well? Republic is reporting live from Ukraine and Russia tonight.
Republic goes where the story lies. Tonight we come to you live from the Ukrainian capital of Kiev as the battle between Russia and Ukraine has only intensified. 24 hours after the aggressive speech that has been made by Russian President Vladimir Putin.
In this regard, I deem it necessary to make a decision that should have been made a long time ago, to immediately recognize the independence and sovereignty of Donetsk People's Republic and Lugansk People's Republic.
Where the story is. Tonight we come to you live from the Ukrainian city of Kiev in the middle of that battle between Russia and Ukraine. The battle has only intensified. In the last 4 to 5 hours that we have spent here on the streets of Ukraine, speaking to a cross-section of people, there is a sense of palpable anger just after that announcement that was made by Russian President Vladimir Putin as far as recognizing the breakaway regions of Donetsk and Luhansk.
And as it has been done previously when they expanded NATO to the east, moving infrastructure, military infrastructure closer to our borders, ignoring our protests and our warnings, they just didn't care about that. They did whatever they deemed necessary and appropriate. And I believe they plan to continue doing like that.
My colleague Patrick has been reporting from Donetsk, where there's been increased shelling. Russians have been pointing out that there has been an aggression that has been shown by the Ukrainians by increased shelling in the area, and this situation, the security situation, still remains very, very critical as far as Donbas region is concerned.
This is Patrick Lancaster with a special report for Republic Media Network, and right now I'm on the highway going from Donetsk to Gorlivka in the anti-Ukraine government Donetsk People's Republic, which was recognized as independent by Russia last night. And we're here on the scene of what the local authorities here are calling a terrorist attack by Ukraine forces. They say there was a timing device here connected to a bomb, or possibly radio controlled as well, that detonated a bomb here on the side of the road. They said the bomb was right here in this location.
Across the globe, this move made by the Russians hasn't really gone down well. British cabinet ministers have already indicated that the invasion has already begun. The question remains, when exactly will the sanctions be imposed by the West, and how exactly will the Russians react to this entire move?
If Vladimir Putin continues down this track of violence, of aggression, of a full-scale invasion, of encircling Kiev itself, which is what he seems to be proposing to do, capturing the Ukrainian capital, it is absolutely vital that effort, that conquest of another European country should not succeed, and that Putin should fail. And that is what we will be exerting ourselves to ensuring is the outcome.
India, meanwhile, has taken the mid part in the United Nations Security Council, saying that the safety of Ukrainian citizens remains paramount.
As we have time and again emphasized, constructive diplomacy is the need of the hour to avoid scaling up of tensions. We strongly emphasize the vital need for all sides to maintain international peace and security, by exercising the utmost restraint and intensifying diplomatic efforts to ensure that a mutually amicable solution is arrived at the earliest.
The story goes beyond Kiev, and we at Republic Media Network will be traveling across Ukraine to get the real sense of this conflict, which has global ramifications.
That could be controlled, that could be monitored, that could be reacted to. Because everything else could be changed tomorrow, like the current head of Ukraine did when he basically started criminal persecution of the former president for this alleged treason, because he doesn't like the Minsk agreements. And they could also disavow all the agreements that I have just spoken about if they were to be adopted by the current authorities. He could just move to Washington, to Paris, to Berlin, and we would have been left with a country, armed country up to its teeth, that has anti-Russian sentiments. But it's impossible after the current authorities are talking about their ideas.
Alexander Yunushev Live.
Mr. Putin, yesterday in your address to Russians, you talked about Zelensky's statement, not for the first time, I think, that, according to him, Ukraine could have nuclear weapons again, could join the nuclear club again. But are these just words, or we face a real threat that next to our borders in Ukraine there will be nuclear weapon? Thank you.
I've just talked about that. I believe that those words were aimed at us primarily, and we have heard those words. Since Soviet times, Ukraine has had very wide nuclear competences, so to speak. They have a number of nuclear power plants and strong nuclear industry. They have the technology, and they have the specialists, so it's very easy for them. It would be really easy for them to gain nuclear weapons compared to many other countries that need to start from scratch. And you know that very well. There's one component they lack. They cannot enrich uranium, but that's just a matter of hardware. It's not something Ukraine cannot solve. This problem can be solved relatively quickly. As for the systems of delivery of these potential nuclear weapons, there's actually old Russian and Soviet missiles that can reach targets 100 kilometers away. It's very much feasible for Ukrainian industry to produce those. But what's the threat to Russia? Even if Ukraine gains tactical nuclear weapons, that means a strategic threat to Russia. That is what we must consider now. Because once you have 100 kilometers, then you have 300 kilometers or 500 kilometers, and then Moscow would be in range of a potential adversary's nuclear weapons. That would be a threat, and that is how we see it. That is why we have treated this so seriously, and we will continue to do so.
So let's give the floor to Kolesnikov. Andrei Kolesnikov, Khorasan Daily. Mr. Putin, how do you think, in the modern world, in today's world, could it be that we could still be on the side of good by resolving things via force? That's the first question. And second question is more technical. In your understanding, how far the troops can go till the contact line or till the administrative borders of DPR and LPR, maybe something else?
Well, first off, I didn't say that right now, after this conversation, we will have Russian forces march into the two republics. Secondly, it is impossible to predict the scenario that will unfold. That will depend on the situation on the ground. Now, as to whether issues could be resolved through force and whether you can use force and stay on the side of good, what would you like to say that good forces should be helpless or defenseless? Good should not be defenseless. Good should be able to defend itself, and that is our position. Thank you.
That was a press conference we just saw. Vladimir Putin, I think he's not playing it safe. He's making it quite clear. He's not given timelines out here, viewers. He's not said, I'm going to go and invade immediately after this, but it's as close as you can get to that. I want to just summarize the main points he said out there as I welcome my panelists this evening. And I have with me, of course, Shravan Sen, our senior associate editor reporting from Kiev tonight. I have Marcus Papadopoulos, and he's a historian, analyst, and author specializing in Russia and the former Soviet Union. He's live from London. He's to the left of my screen. And Leonid Savin is Director General of the Foundation of Monitoring and Forecasting, live from Moscow tonight. I also have with me, live from Moscow, the Deputy Chief of the Sputnik websites, a very famous news website in Russia, Tatiana Kokhareva. Tatiana, thank you. Victor Gao, Strategic Affairs expert, geopolitical expert, live from Beijing tonight. Dr. Rich Outson, he's a retired colonel of the U.S. Army and former advisor at the State Department. He's senior fellow at the Jamestown Foundation, and he's from Virginia. Thomas Schwartz, distinguished professor of history and the professor of political science at Vanderbilt University in Tennessee, USA. I see Anders Kaur, publisher of the Journal of Political Risk, also with us tonight. So that's my panel as of now. Summary quickly, Shravan, going across to you. He hasn't said, I'm invading immediately, but it's as close as it can get. Very cool. He says it's all about the weaponization of the Ukraine by the US. He's saying you can't have nuclear weapons. I think he's playing on what the Ukrainian president said. He just kept pushing on the nuclear issue. And he said that, you know, how far can troops go? I can't say. I'm not going to predict it. And immediately left the press conference. There seems to be an invasion imminent. What's the mood in Kiev? Shravan.
Well, in fact, Arnab, as far as the Ukrainians are concerned, they are saying they are not surprised. The reason being is that back in January, the Russian Duma had already passed a draft legislation in which they wanted a recognition of Donetsk and Lugansk. So they're saying that this was a prelude, and Russia essentially wants a reason. And what we heard from the Russian president today was the other reason, the nuclear threat, the so-called nuclear threat. The Ukrainians are saying that, look here, things are very different. Back in 2014, when Crimea was annexed by the Russians, not a single fire was shot by the Ukrainian army. This time, the Ukrainians, almost everyone that I've spoken to in the last 4 to 5 hours, even one of the advisors to the defense minister, who's essentially indicated that, look here, we are very busy right now preparing of what is going to come. But the question here is about the role of the West also, or not, because they're saying, what about the sanctions that you've been speaking about? And the Ukrainians alone perhaps cannot defend themselves. However, having said that, they're trying to put up a brave face. In fact, let me just quickly, if you permit, or not, this place from where I'm broadcasting right now is very, very significant. Back in 2014, there was a massive protest. And what you see behind me is what the Ukrainians called the Monument of Independence. In fact, they say that this monument really irks the Russians, primarily because the statue of Stalin was brought down and this Monument of Independence was installed, which they say that still becomes the inspiration for them to take on the fight. So this is going to be very different. If the invasion is imminent, the Ukrainians are saying that we are prepared to fight.
Okay, Shravan, please stay on and co-anchor this segment with me. I'll keep it very, very elementary, and I want to go across first to our friends in Moscow, to Tatiana first. I think this is close to an invasion. In fact, Joe Biden has declared it an invasion. What's left? Is there any room left for any negotiation at all, or is it a matter of time? Tatiana, please.
Well, it's a very interesting thought to call it an invasion when, in fact, what we're calling it is, it is just answering the request for health and for peacekeeping mission within the newly acknowledged republics. And of course, Joe Biden would call it an invasion, wouldn't he?
Wouldn't you call it that?
It makes all the sense in the world.
Wouldn't you call it that? This is who denied this is aggression. But I won't debate with you. I'll get Colonel Outzen to respond to you from Virginia. Colonel Outzen.
Well, thank you. It's good to be with you again.
Thank you.
And of course, our Russian friends would not call it invasion. I would not call it an invasion if I was in fact engaged in an invasion. What we've seen now is a break in cognitive reality where the people inside Russia and listening to RT and the other propagandistic outlets of the Russian government are getting a very well-woven narrative complete with fake explosions and accusations of terrorism that doesn't exist and the specter of nuclear weapons that the Ukraine has no intention of developing, all of which are made to buttress Putin's arguments to his own people. They're not convincing anybody else, hopefully not in India, certainly not in the United States or Europe, because what we've seen now is a movement towards naked territorial aggression and the attempt to erase the Ukraine from the map. So it's not working, and the rest of us see it clearly as an
I'll just take a moment. I'll take a moment. Tatiana responding. Yes, please.
Yeah. Look, it's very interesting, again, that you're calling it an invasion. What do you call U.S. military that are right now in Ukraine? Is that not an invasion then?
Well, the Ukraine, as a recognized nation state with a seat at the United Nations, has the sovereign right to request assistance from its friends and allies. The imaginary quasi-republics that were created as convenient fictions by Vladimir Putin have no such recognition and no such sovereign right. So ours is not an invasion, it's assistance. And by the way, I mean, look, we've invaded folks too. So.
You're saying that the referendum that took place in 2014 was imagined by Vladimir Putin. So the millions of people that voted in that referendum and that decided that they want to self-identify, they didn't want to join Russia, they wanted to be separate from Ukraine and separate from a nationalist government that was oppressing part of the population. That was imagined by the Russian president, and that didn't happen. Also, the violence on Maidan didn't happen, and Ukrainian snipers that shot at journalists on Maidan didn't happen. And in fact, there was no coup d'etat. It was just a very peaceful transition of power from a legally elected president who was not attempted, there was no attempted assassination. It was just a very peaceful transition of power from a legally elected Ukrainian president to a group of nationalist commandos in Kiev. Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is that the credibility and bona fides of our Russian friends when it comes to the legitimacy of elections, despite the ample help you've tried to provide to our electoral process, is frequently called into question. So yes, it is a fiction.
Your electoral process is definitely not the subject of conversation here. And, you know, I as much as I appreciate sniper remarks, that's kind of, you know, if we get into that, that's going to take us another 2 hours to discuss. I do believe that.
Okay, a lot of viewers tuning in here, Tatiana, to that sharp exchange between both sides. But I just want to tell you, Tatiana, fundamental fact here is this, you know, and American friends must also understand here. Why should Russia not respond? My question here. Why should Russia not respond? Tell me, Professor Schwartz, you know, our reporter, Republic Network's reporter at the highway from Donetsk showed all our viewers today a civilian car with charred dead bodies because of bombings by Ukraine. Civilians in cars bombed, the bodies unidentifiable. So tell me, Professor, should Russia just sit back and say, okay, let America send weapons to kill innocent people, let a few more people die, it's all right. We'll give them Javelin missiles, let the Javelin missiles, let the shoulder-launched multi-purpose assault weapons and bunker busters kill a few more people down there in the areas where the rebels have taken you. Let people die. What would you expect? Putin will sit back and say, I will do nothing? Professor, over to you. And we'll get a response from Leonid Shavin from Moscow after that. Thank you.
Well, we've also seen, of course, shelling from the Russian areas that has hit kindergartens in the Ukrainian-controlled areas. The actual credibility of the Russian claim is one that's very difficult to assess. And I think the idea that simply the Ukrainians are engaged in aggression, I think strains the truth, given the circumstances that are occurring there. This is straight out of, and I hesitate to say this, but this is straight out of the book of Axis dictators in the 1930s, of staging provocations in order to justify territorial aggression. And this is essentially Russia is engaged in a process of trying to recreate the old Soviet Union by taking Ukraine by force. And this is what we're seeing, and unfortunately, the West is pretty much standing by to allow it to happen.
So you're saying it's a script. It's a textbook. Yes. I want Mr. Savin to respond. He's saying it's a textbook move of a very ambitious Putin who just wants to stitch the old USSR back. It's predetermined, pre-rehearsed textbook move, he says.
Of course not. Mr. Putin wants not to restore United USSR, and he told it many times before. Actually, Russia doing the same thing the West done many times before. It's doctrine responsibility to protect. United States and Western allies of United States use it many times in Europe, in Yugoslavia, for example, in Haiti, and many other places. And Russia just would like to protect civilian people, protect from genocide organized by neo-Nazi paramilitary groups and some Ukrainian military personnel too. So the problem main is that we should have done 8 years before, and we could save many lives. But now we do it just yesterday. So I think it's very good and right decision.
So yeah, what's going to happen now? Is my sense correct, Shawan? I want Shawan to get into this with me. The sense I'm getting is a resigned anger from the West. But the operational word being resigned. We hate what Putin is doing. It's immoral, but he's doing it anyway. And I think to an extent, I think Lavrov is right when he says it's useless to count on American military aid. You know, the Russian foreign minister said, it's pointless to count on the military assistance of the United States. This was always known to anyone. If anyone had any illusions that such help will come, such advisors are worthless in any government. So I think in their playbook, in the Russian playbook, they know it's Ukraine for Ukraine. For all the big talk, nobody is going to come to their military aid. Shawan, but is that the sense you get there in Kiev? And please take it forward.
Well, absolutely, Arnav, because the moment we started speaking to just ordinary Ukrainians, not those who are part of the government, they are saying that, look here, we were waiting for some sort of an help to really come in from the West. They spoke about sanctions. They went on threatening that sanctions would be taken. They were going to be strict in nature. But the fact of the matter is that it hasn't really happened. Second, they are saying that they're not going to be really surprised if the Russians basically go ahead with the invasion. They're saying that it is very, very much possible, it is plausible, and it could come anytime. So it's not going to be really a very surprising move as far as the Ukrainians are concerned. But they are saying right now is that what really happens if the invasion takes place, they're going to fight it out. But they also know that it's not going to be an easy task, because you look at the southeastern Ukrainian part, the north drills that are taking place in Belarus, it's over 10 days where the military drills haven't really ended. It's going to continue. So the distraction for the Ukrainian
army
Donbass
is gone then. You know, for the fact then is, Shawan, then Donbass is gone, and Lavrov is right. I don't think either the Americans will fight for Ukraine and Donbass. I don't think anyone from NATO is going to fight the Russians in Donbass. I think that appears to be a foregone conclusion as far as I'm concerned. Dr. Marcus, what do you think? From London, Dr. Marcus, please come into the debate along with Anders Kaur from London as well. Dr. Marcus, what do you think? Is Donbass gone? Are those provinces gone?
Let me say, first of all, that it really is inversion at its most inverted when one hears the American government lecture into Russia and the rest of the world about the need to respect international law.
When America is, of course, the leading violator of international law. For example, when NATO, which America is the de facto leader of, bombed Yugoslavia in 1999, not only did this contravene international law, it also contravened NATO's own founding treaty, specifically Article 1 of the North Atlantic Treaty, which states very clearly that NATO will never use force to resolve a dispute. Now, turning to Ukraine, in the short term, the crisis surrounding Ukraine is on account of the American-engineered coup in Kiev in February of 2014, which saw a democratically elected leader, Viktor Yanukovych, whose election victory in 2010 was recognized by the European Union and America, overthrown and replaced by some of the most violently anti-Russian people one can find in Ukraine. People who, largely speaking, emanate from the westernmost part of the country. And in the long term, the reason for the tension surrounding Ukraine is on account of how America, ever since December of 1991, when Ukraine became an independent country, has coveted Ukraine. So much so that the Americans seek Ukrainian membership of NATO in order to completely enclose Russia on its western border, because the Americans understand very well that a Russia weakened in Europe is a Russia weakened in the world.
No, but okay, flip side. Flip side, if I may, are the Russians being a little overconfident? Because you've held the cards so long in this conversation that maybe you're being blind in your trust of China. I say this to Victor Gao. Never trust the Chinese, Dr. Marcus. You cannot hedge your bets on the Chinese. You know, it will backfire. And it will be Russia which would have pushed Ukraine towards NATO. Can it not backfire for Russia? Tatiana, do you think it will not backfire for Russia? The US can cut off the SWIFT system due to multi-billion exports of hydrocarbons denominated by US dollars. Can you afford it? It's all right now, but Germany has already halted the Nord. Question is, can you afford the consequences? Tatiana, let's talk realistically, beyond the military aspect, please.
Let's talk realistically. Definitely a good subject. Look, we don't need to push Ukraine into NATO. It's been running towards NATO for years now, begging for NATO to come and just, you know, for one reason or the other. You know, one of those reasons potentially, you know, the fact that they still would have to pay, you know, they still have to pay a huge debt for gas, which might actually make those consequences that you talk about easier for Russia. Germany has frozen the project, but it's not cancelled. So, you know, it's a little bit early, I think. But
that was a critical project for you. Very critical, designed to double the flow of Russian gas direct to Germany. No, you need the project. You can't pretend, Tatiana, you don't need the project.
And Germany needs the project as well. We need the project as much as Germany needs the project, because I know that obviously the US wants to sell their liquefied gas to Europe, but Europe needs Russian gas. There's no question about that.
Tapiana, if I can just add one simple point here. As far as the Ukrainians are concerned, Tatiana, the Ukrainian ambassador to United Kingdom spoke about the NATO membership, and they were saying that they are willing to discuss about it. Many here in Ukraine are saying the demands that have been put up by the Russian president is unacceptable. So they do not want, the Russians do not want any sort of negotiation to really take place.
Also, Anders, the point being, Tatiana, sorry, I'm coming in here, but is it realistic to expect a picture being created by Moscow that a dangerous nuclear-armed Ukraine is going to just, hammer all of Russia with nuclear bombs and eliminate Russia from the face of the earth? I mean, this whole presentation which has been made, how many people actually buy it? Anders?
Putin is a liar. Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons by itself. He's a cheat. He's a killer. He kills, he bombs civilian populations in Syria, in Chechnya, to get what he wants, which is more territory, more power. The guy is a power-hungry dictator. He's best friends with Xi Jinping, who we know what kind of stuff China does to India. We know the tactics. We know exactly the tactics that these brutal dictators use to steal a little bit of territory. Regardless of the thousands of lives that are going to die because of what Putin did today. I mean, it's totally unconscionable. And I'll tell you what, the West is going to hit him hard. There's not going to be $1 left in Moscow. There's not going to be £1 sterling left in Moscow. When the Europeans get involved, there's not going to be any euros in Moscow. The place is going to be, it isn't going to have any cabbage. They call it kapusta in Moscow. There's going to be no more cabbage there. And the Ukrainians are going to have shoulder-fired missiles to shoot down the helicopters and the planes, and they're going to have shoulder-fired anti-tank missiles to shoot down any tracked vehicles and tanks. We don't need to put U.S. troops or NATO troops into Ukraine. We're just going to send the missiles to do it. Ukrainians are going to shoot them.
That is adorable. It's a very, very American position, and you have sent them the missiles, haven't you? But the problem is that, again, we're talking about something that only exists in the US paradigm. There is no invasion of Ukraine. There hasn't been any invasion of Ukraine. There are two republics that have asked that have declared independence and that have asked, again, I'm not going to get into, personal accusations, because it is the last country, the US is the last country that can talk about power-hungry dictators and about invading countries without their consent. Because we can start a list of Middle Eastern countries that the US went into in a power move and in an attempt to get a power grab, and that list is endless.
But Tatiana, that's what Leonid suggested in his first intervention. You're saying you do not want to get into what America did in the Middle East, in North African countries, but that's what he said. He said we are playing from the American textbook. If you disagree with the textbook, then why are you playing from it?
If you listen to the president, again, it's adorable that everybody is trying to put words in his mouth, but there is no invasion, and there was no invasion. Again, two republics that have declared independence, that have suffered immense human loss, civilian loss, for 8 years.
You have some, but can your president show the slightest proof that Moscow or any part of Russia is going to be bombed by nuclear bombs and nuclear missiles from Ukraine? You cannot put these very convoluted theories, these fairy tale situations. The Russian media will eat out of his hands, but who will believe him? He's built a narrative so far, but isn't it sounding fictional now, Tatiana? His own narrative is sounding fictional. I'm sure, even to the Russian people. How many people in Russia believe Ukraine would have bombed, and this is all an act of self-defense, just to help a poor few rebels in one part of Ukraine? And second point is, economic brinkmanship. You're doing this, and you'll agree, at a time when the Russian economy is in tatters. When people can't eat, and the Russian economy is in tatters. It has huge oil dependencies, and what if this approach of diplomatic barter does not work. What then? Are there no negatives in this for you? A win-win situation, you're saying?
Again, we're talking about a peacekeeping mission and about the recognition of something that was long overdue because the Minsk agreements that Moscow has called endlessly for Kiev to abide by,
Professor Schwartz,
were always broken.
Okay, Professor Schwartz, I'm getting a response to that, Tatiana. Professor Schwartz, he's shaking his hand vigorously. She says that all we want is we are a peace-loving, peacekeeping country. We're keeping the peace. We just want peace. We just want the Minsk agreement to be enforced. That's all that we want, she says.
That's nonsense, and she knows it. I mean, this is the idea is they want to control the Ukraine, and essentially what's going to happen will be the encouragement of the two republics to claim the additional territory that they have, and that the peacekeeping forces then will be engaged in aggression. Obviously, the Ukraine, Putin does not believe that Ukraine enjoys a national existence. He doesn't recognize its independence. That's clear, and so therefore.
But what will you do? My question is, what will you do? No, what will you do? What will you do? Suppose after in a couple of hours from now, or maybe 12 hours from now, Russian troops just go in. It's going to take minutes. This is their backyard. This is their backyard. It will take minutes. You know that.
Yes.
What will anyone do?
That the only thing will be economic sanctions. They may be effective, but I don't think this is an adequate response at all. And I think that we're going to pay for this down the line.
If I can add a thought to that.
Okay.
One question.
I think there will be more than economic sanctions, because I think that we are going to, as Russia, and I'm going to grant Tatiana a point here. If she doesn't want to call this an invasion, I'll agree it's not an invasion. It's far worse. It's an attempt to absorb. At least with the American invasions, we come and we go. We're out of Afghanistan.
No.
We're out of Iraq. We're not in Libya.
And then you go.
But Russia is trying to absorb and deny the entire national existence of the Ukraine. This is a new game. It's a game we've seen in the 19th century and the 20th, but not yet in the 21st.
Okay, so this
will put the United States from a position of trying to signal with sanctions to trying to harm.
How?
And to the extent that Russia tries, there's a lot of tools. There's a lot of tools in the toolbox.
Okay.
Some of them include the financial sector.
Okay.
Some of them include if the Russians are irresponsible enough to try to go deep into the Ukraine, because I don't think they're going to. I would like to believe Tatiana, but I don't think they're going to stay in Donetsk and Luhansk. If they try to go to Kyiv, if they try to go to Odessa, places like that, you will see a whole nother level of American support to the Ukrainian nation.
And then what, Marcus?
And it won't just
Dr. Marcus shaking his head vigorously. I'm looking at the responses. Dr. Marcus, he says Russia is not going to be happy. They are describing Putin as a warmongering, bloodthirsty, territory-seeking dictator who's gone out of control with unbridled ambitions well beyond his known capacities. He will not stay in Donetsk. He will move forward, and then there will be an escalation scenario being presented to you. That was from Colonel Outson, please. Yes, would you like to respond, Marcus?
Our American guests are demonstrating their utter ignorance of Ukraine and their utter ignorance of Russian history in general, because what we have seen in the last few months in particular is Western mainstream media depict Russia as an alien country in Ukraine, which is absolutely preposterous nonsense. If I was to say to our American guests now, tell me the significance of 1654, tell me the significance of the Treaty of Pereyaslav, tell me the significance of Bogdan Khmelnitsky, I tell you from now
they would not have a clue as to what I have just referred to. The truth
but
is
I know
this,
what the Holodomor
apart from
was.
the westernmost parts of Ukraine, regions such as Lvov, Russia is not regarded as an alien country in Ukraine. Indeed, in places such as Kharkov, Dnipropetrovsk, Kherson, Zaporozhye, Odessa, Mariupol, Nikolaev, much of the population there regard themselves as part of the Russian world. They identify themselves as part of the Russian world. They are members of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, of the Moscow Patriarchate. Therefore, that is why I say that the depiction of Russia in Ukraine is grotesquely wrong. People are of the impression in Western countries that Ukraine and Russia are totally distinct from one another, which is a complete and utter falsehood. Most of the Ukrainian population are members, as I said, of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the Moscow Patriarchate. They do not regard Russia as an alien country. But as I said just now, perhaps our guests can tell me the significance of 1654 and the Treaty of Pereyaslav.
Would anyone like to take that? Anders responding. Yeah, I saw Anders responding. Anders, yeah.
Yeah, it's an independent country now. They had a vote. They didn't. They had a. They kicked,
I asked you a very specific question. Tell me the significance of 1654.
Oh, and I said it doesn't matter because
I asked you a very specific question. Tell me the significance of the Treaty of Pereyaslav.
Trusty documents from the 17th century.
Tell me the significance of old crusty document. Well, I will tell you the significance. In 1654, Bogdan Khmelnitsky, who was the leader of the Zaporozhian host, asked the Tsardom of Russia for protection from Poland.
You grab territory, and a couple years later, I'll grab territory. It goes back and forth.
The people of borderland, the people of the Tsardom of Russia became one. And after that, when the Russian Empire began expanding southwards, they started attaching lands to a region known as the borderland, as the Ukraine. You know nothing about Ukraine. You know nothing about Russian history.
You could not have
had a better
explanation.
Russian dictators trying to control people who want to have freedom. That's what I know.
Freedom, if America was so concerned about freedom, why do you have one of the closest of relationships in the world with Saudi Arabia, which is without a doubt the most wicked country in the world and the leading exporter of Islamism in the world? Well, you can shake your head and you can laugh, but quite frankly, the victims of Islamist terrorism in the world will not be shaking their heads.
Since there's a history test involved now from London, Mr. Marcus.
No, one sec. Marcus, that's who take that? You want to take that, Major Outson? Yeah. Okay, you can.
Yeah. Well, since there's a history test, I'd like Mr. Marcus to tell us a little bit about the Holodomor, and maybe why the Ukrainians might not see the singularity of their nation with the Russians the same way you do. By your logic, Canada, which speaks our language and which plays our same sports and eats our same food, we should be up there tomorrow, right? Removing the border. But we don't do that because they are a separate nation with their own history. Your historical thesis is risible and ridiculous.
Preposterous nonsense. That analogy is preposterous nonsense. Russians, Belarusians and Ukrainians are the same people. They are East Slavs. And regarding the Holodomor, well, let me tell you from now that there was no such thing as a Ukrainian genocide. What we saw unfold in Soviet Ukraine and in other parts of the Soviet Union was the consequences of collectivization, a policy which was ill thought out and recklessly implemented by the Soviet government.
Marcus, may I just come in?
Died of starvation.
May I come in for a moment, please? And while I do respect, and truly so, I'm not in the least being sarcastic about it. I do respect Russian nationalism, and I think that Putin has every right to to take Russia back to the greatness he feels it deserves. the question is, at what point does one have to stop? Because this is, you see, as Shawan tried to tell you earlier from Ukraine, this is not going to be limited to Donetsk and Ukraine.
That's who?
This is, Tatiana, going to be much bigger. And by the way, everything is linked. We live in a multilateral world. By your own argument, allow me to complete, this is not a unipolar or a bipolar world. We live in a world of tremendous interdependencies, and the interdependencies will be visible to Russia as well. You are, whether you deny it or not, already more interdependent on China today than you were 1 month back. And that is a reality. Should China change its position, it will affect Russia. And there will be, you know, global reverberations. I think even, Tatiana, you can't fool yourself by saying this will have no impact globally. This will have an impact globally. And the question, therefore, is, as a responsible member of the global community, will Russia play a part? It has to. And it can't keep a question mark all the time. You know, we may go beyond Donetsk, we may not. It depends. We are being provoked. We reserve a right to act. This is our backyard. We have a shared food, culture, history, language, affiliations. But the point is, you're dealing with an independent country, and the question is that if you do believe in territorial assertion in your backyard in the way that you do, there will be global consequences. Tatiana, you have to be realistic about it. Even Victor Gao will tell you that, and I'm telling you one more thing, Tatiana, never, ever depend on the Chinese. The worst move one can ever play is depend on the Chinese. Victor, am I not right? Would you not tell Tatiana yourself? She's not believing me. Tell her from Beijing. Never depend on Chinese.
Wrong.
Please.
Absolutely wrong.
Yes.
China has the longest history of being truthful to its treaty obligations. And China and Russia are standing side by side. We share a common border of more than 4,700 kilometers. And President Putin and President Xi Jinping of China declared that both China and Russia oppose continued expansion of NATO into countries like Ukraine. I would say Russia has declared that Ukraine should not join NATO or over its dead body. So Russia will vehemently oppose any attempt by Ukraine to join NATO.
Victor,
the United States and NATO members Victor,
I tell you one thing. You know, on a lighter note, let me tell you, China is a wonderful country, and it always vows eternal allegiance to its immediate short-term friend. Why? In fact, 6 months back, you said we and the Pakistanis are hand in glove. We are brothers under the same sky, under the same sun. You know, we have the same shared goals. But poor Imran Khan went all the way to Beijing, and Jinping didn't even meet him on a Zoom conference. You insulted him and sent him back. So please don't tell me about your eternal allegiance to any other country. My question to you is more direct and geopolitical. Please tell me that, like you are supporting Russian territorial expansion on their western border today, you will not expect Russian support in your territorial ambitions in the South China Sea with Taiwan.
No.
There's nothing like a free lunch when it comes to the Chinese, Victor. You know that. I love Chinese food, but there's nothing like a free lunch with the Chinese. Tell me, what are you expecting in turn? Please tell me. See, even Thomas has started laughing. Now even Tatiana is smiling. She knows. Everyone knows the Chinese. Tell me, what's your game? Tell me, what's your game? What's your game? What's your game? Tell the Russians, what's your game with them? Don't tell them there's no game. What's your game?
Of NATO into Ukraine. This is an absolute basic point. No one should testify by drawing Ukraine into NATO, because that will be suicidal for the United States, for NATO members.
Why didn't you fight China? Why don't you fight America directly?
Russia,
why do you want to shoot off the Russian shoulder?
And Russia's fundamental position is not to be pushed by any country.
You just got pushed by India in Galwan. We gave you a bloody nose. We killed so many of your soldiers and sent you back. You have an army that cannot fight. You have an army that cannot fight and has not fought. Your last experience in the Korean War, everybody knows about that. You have an army that cannot fight. I respect the Russian army. They fight. They're a fighting force. You're not a fighting force.
You forgot what happened in 1962.
Yeah.
You forgot what happened.
And you forgot what happened 6 months back. You forgot what happened 6 months back in Galwan. We gave you a bloody nose and sent you back. And then you sent Chinese actors in a propaganda video. You were given a bloody nose by the Indian army. You have nowhere to stand. You do not have a fighting army. You do not have a fighting army. I respect the Russian army. They can fight. You cannot fight. Come on. You couldn't even, for all your hollow claims, this is a poor attempt, I say, by you, Victor, to take away from the reality that all your rhetoric on India and Taiwan is down to dust. It's been pounded to dust. You have nothing to do, so you're fighting of the Russian. Fight the Americans directly. Why don't you? Fight them directly.
Who fought the Americans in the Korean War?
Korean War.
Check out history.
You keep bringing back Korean War.
You take that history, sir.
Come on, Victor. Take on the Americans yourself if you can.
Who took on the Americans in the Korean War, sir?
Okay, I won't. I'm not an American. The Americans can respond for themselves. Yes, please. Any of you would like to, Professor? I've just said this is China's game.
Go to Washington and check the Korean War Memorial. You will see who fought the Americans.
Colonel, outset.
Well, look, the truth of the matter is that China, at a very difficult time in its own national history, when they were losing tens of millions of people to the ill-planned Great Leap Forward and all sorts of other things, did commit in a serious way to try to help their friends in the North Korean dictatorship. They did fight. They didn't fight terribly well, but they fought bravely. They died by the tens of thousands. And we respect their war dead as we respect our own war dead. The Chinese military of today is very different. I'm not sure I would say they can't fight. I would say that we hope they don't have to fight and that they are, well,
what do you mean they don't have to fight? What do you mean they don't have to fight?
What I mean is that China, like Russia, is studying very carefully the response of the West right now.
In what way?
They're trying to figure out if hard power is how they will achieve their national goals. Will they get it by coercing other countries, by extinguishing small neighbors, and by intimidating the West? The question depends upon the West in many ways. I do hope that actually...
No, but why is the West waited till now? Colonel Outson, listen, I mean, I'll ask you the other side. Why are you getting all paranoid right now? Russia had already issued passports to Donbass regions in 2019. They issued 800,000 Russian passports to Donbass residents in April 2019. What happened now? You were waiting for COVID to end?
No, the difference is that as of last summer, with his great historical essay, Vladimir Putin made it clear that he no longer considers the Ukraine to be a sovereign country. When another country with nuclear weapons and a large military pairs that with a historical thesis denies the independence and sovereignty of their neighbors, be it China with Taiwan, or be it Russia with Ukraine,
I'll give the last word to Shawan.
And that is not acceptable.
My friend from Ukraine, who's there, right there in Kiev, would like to ask the last question. This is so interesting, but behind you, as I see there, you know, it seems like a normal night, normal evening in Kiev. Shawan, last word to you, please. This has been a volatile, very controlled discussion, but across the world, you know, people are angrier and thinking of ways to respond. Shawan.
Well, in fact, on the moment we landed here, that's the first reaction even we had, like, in the face of this kind of an aggression, why is it that the people of Ukraine appear to be so very calm? And that's the question that I asked. And almost everyone said that, look here, we are really not surprised. This is going to come. And if it comes, we're going to fight it out. That's the spirit that we've essentially seen. We'll be traveling across Ukraine to get the real sense of what's really happening and how exactly would the Ukrainians react now. Because they're saying next 24 to 48 hours becomes even more crucial because pretty much the playbook is very clear. The Russian playbook is very clear. Prelude that was already seen as far as Donbass region is concerned. And perhaps some activity on the northern side as well as the southeastern side. These are the two places that one perhaps will have to
I have just one last observation as a journalist. And this is that, you know, 2014 or 15, I think 2015, I traveled to Moscow on the invitation of RT. We were there at a conference, and I had myself predicted to people that the propaganda machine of Russia is going to become bigger. I mean, maybe propaganda is not the right word. The media machinery of Russia is going to become more influential than that of the West. And this is not a battle between armies alone. This time the media machinery that Russia has put into this is significant. Very, very significant. And America knows that. So we'll watch. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm grateful. This has been a very interesting discussion. Let's hope good sense prevails. And before I go, Mansi Sharma says, good evening, Arnab. The coverage on various issues on Republic reporting global events assures us that the end of the dominance of the Western media is not far now. Absolutely true. Ishika Sen says, great global ground zero reporting of Shawan sir on the Ukraine crisis. I'm so proud of Shawan and the work being done by Mridul, our video journalist Rawat, everyone on the ground there. And Varsha from Kozhikode says, I'm from Kerala. Here the mainstream media has gone completely silent on the Harsha murder like the Lutyens channels. Republic is the only channel covering this so deep. Thank you so much, Varsha. Appreciate your writing to me. And viewers, I shall be back tomorrow. Remember, global coverage from Ukraine on the ground, from the Donetsk region, from various global capitals is here on Republic. We are working really hard to bring you the best in class of global coverage. See you tomorrow. Good night and goodbye.